Hello everyone. Thanks for joining. Also, fun fact before we get going, if you want a really easy way to sort kids in their breakout groups, you can have if you teach them how to rename themselves, it's really, really easy so that you can just see all the ones or whatever symbols or letters you put for them. Fun fact. All right, let's share the screen. Let's get started. So first off, hats off to you that you are rock stars and you are here in March. It is, I don't know who allowed it to be March and who gave it permission to be March again. But hats off to you for like still working on all of these sorts of things, still trying to find new technology, still trying to like find what works for your students and end the year on a really positive note. So we're gonna work with Nearpod today. Before we get going, just a quick little programming update. We have a bunch of different courses, and if I have any French teachers, I am starting on Monday, starting to teach my French grammar course if you're interested. We'll be talking all different sorts of things, how to make grammar work, and it does work for hybrid, regular school, whatever that looks like ever in the future. Fun facts. All right, so let's go over a quick little plan here for us. So just 3 little goals I want to do in the beginning part, and then give us some time at the end to kind of start working, just to kind of see what is Nearpod. I feel like it's one of those things you hear about a lot, but actually seeing what it is, seeing what activities look like, and then starting to select your different activities. And then at the end, we'll have time if you're interested in creating a lesson. So what actually is Nearpod? So these are 2 words that I wish never to use again after this school year: synchronous and asynchronous. But so Nearpod works for both. So I think of it as, if you're familiar with Pear Deck, I think of Nearpod as a more advanced Pear Deck with a lot more features and a lot more like almost hands-on sorts of, as hands-on as virtual can get. It works for synchronous classes. So if you were to do like a live Zoom class, you can have everybody on at the same time doing activities, and you as the teacher move everything along. You can also have it asynchronous, where let's say that you have to give like homework assignments or asynchronous lessons to your students on certain days, or in the future, I envision sub-plans as something I could use this for. You can have students, you can just give them the link to what I'm about to show you, and they can work independently on these sorts of things. So it's really, really cool. In those sense, I've used it with both situations, synchronous and asynchronous, and I really like it. The way I kind of think of it is it makes things a little bit more interactive, especially on the student end. It kind of combines a lot of tools. You'll see that there's some things that look like, if you're familiar with Pear Deck, they have some Pear Deck things. If you're familiar with Edpuzzle, it also has a slight Edpuzzle-ish feature. There's different things in terms of like quizzes. There's different things you can integrate with Flipgrid. It's really good at integrating, and it kind of reminds me of the idea of like, you don't have to do all of the technologies. You don't want every single technology that's ever existed. Nearpod's really good at kind of combining them, so it doesn't feel like, all right, we're going to start on this website, then we move to this website, and then to this one. So I really like it. So what I want to show you is a couple of examples of just what it looks like before I jump into the intimidatingness that it starts out as when you see an Nearpod, or how to create one. So here's one I did right in the beginning of this school year. So I can set up these really nice flashcards for them where I give them just words. Here we're working with parts of the house for Spanish teachers. And I could do either definitions or pictures, and having students on their own computer work to kind of match the different pairs that way. Nearpod's good because you can type in whatever words you want. And in terms of pictures, it integrates pretty much with Google Images. You just look for the image that's there, and you can find your pictures. You could also do some, I know this sounds a little bit more old school, but you could also do some fill in the blank sorts of things. For example, if teachers like to do songs, if you want to do like a close activity where it's like listen to the song and fill in the words that you hear, it's really easy for that. You would just write out your text and you get a bunch of words, you just get your words down at the bottom, and kids get to move them where they go. Fun fact that I learned, not from this one, but from a different one: if you make it capital, then it stays capital down here. So just, if you really want them paying attention to those sorts of things, just a minor feature with it. Another thing you can do, you can have them do just regular old writing, right? Just a quick little response here, writing 5 sentences using some of the new words that we were doing. As I'll show you in a couple minutes too, if I have any AP teachers, it's really good for those interpersonal speaking, those conversations that maybe some of you, if you teach AP, you're familiar with those simulated conversations. This allows you to do that. So up here where I was writing, I could make that speech, and down here where the student could be writing, I could also make that required as speech too. And I'll show you how to set those up so you can make a different slide with a different question and make it sort of simulating and interpersonal. I can also just do straight up quizzes. This is based on something we were listening to, right? So just clicking the ones that respond. And on the teacher end, it looks really cool. So you can get a lot of data about how kids are answering, what they're answering, who's not answering, those sorts of things. And then, like I said before, here's where there's a voice option as well. So in terms of actually how to create a Nearpod. So I'm going to show you. Let's go in here for it. So this is what Nearpod looks like. So when you go, you're just going to go nearpod.com. And if you're not signed up, you'll just sign up with your school email. This is me signing up with my home email, because my school email, we have a pro version of this. So I wanted to make sure that if you don't have a pro version, you see what it looks like on this end. Okay. So at first glance, what I never wanted to do is come off as intimidating. Truth be told, when I first saw Nearpod, I was very intimidated. I was like, there's a lot of buttons. I don't know how I feel about buttons. I don't know what I think about that. So let's go through what these sort of buttons look like over here. So I'm in the area that's called My Lessons, which is where I'm going to create things. So I have a nice little button that says create. There's an option to create with Google Slides. There's things we can do with videos or just lessons. I like to create mine in here instead of creating them on Google Slides. I just find it a little bit cleaner for myself. Some people prefer the opposite and prefer to make these things on Google Slides. So when I press that, I'm going to make a new lesson here. I'm going to wait a minute here. So then it'll bring me to this slide here. I can give it a little title up here. And everything I'm going to do is be creating a slide, just as if it was a Google Slide sort of situation. And so when I click on slide, I get two different options in terms of activities. So I can have what they call content, or what I call kind of static things. This is where I can enter just a regular slide with directions if I have a slideshow for them, if I want them to view a PDF that I have, if I just want them to watch a video or listen to an audio, I can just insert it that way. So for example, I think the feature from this page I use the most would just be a slide. So for example, let me show you what this looks like. So if I wanted to create a slide, it kind of looks like a Google slide or a PowerPoint slide. I can be a little fancy over here and choose, I'm going to choose this one, choose my style. I can write whatever I want here. I can add different things here. I can add a file. You can see I can add more text, add a video, adding images, adding GIFs, because, 2021. I can change the layout as well. If I want to have one thing there, if I want to have the two things there, if I want to have multiple things, they're really good about that, and also giving you a preview as well. Just have my changes there. So that's for more static things, right? That's more of like, okay, here's the directions for what you're about to do, or let me give you all of the sentence starters that you should use in your interpersonal when you go into a breakout group. Let me keep this on your screen. In terms of activities, there's a bunch in here, and I haven't tried all of them with my classes, but there's a few that I love to do. So we have open-ended questions. That's where you can insert questions such as like for responses with text or with audio, matching pairs like you saw earlier with vocab words, quizzes where you just give a multiple choice question or like a survey question, integrating with Flipgrid here, drawing features, which I think that kind of gets misconstrued sometimes. I think of drawing in two ways, either drawing to show your comprehension or annotating a text. It's really good for like annotating that way. Collaborating board, which reminds me of Padlet. We have polls we could do, fill in the blanks, and memory tests. So let me show you, for example, open-ended questions, just to show you what that looks like from the teacher end. All right, so on the teacher side, I have the choice right now. I can type my question here, right? Like, what did you do this weekend? Or I could add an image, audio, or other media instead. And so for any upper level teachers, or actually, I don't want to just limit this to upper level teachers. I know a teacher in our district did this with her Spanish 1 students, and this was like their very first interpersonal. We were actually all remote at the time. We were shut down for a little bit. So she did very, very simple ones where she just asked the question of like, hi, what's your name? And then students heard her saying that and were able to respond to it. And then we're moving on to the next slide. It was, how old are you? Or how are you, right? Simple questions. And it doesn't matter what level it really is. They were able to hear and then produce some sort of response afterwards. All I have to do is just make sure that I enable student audio recordings, and they have the capability to do that. So let me go back for a second. So back here, this is what I'm seeing on the teacher end again. So on the teacher end, I see all of my different lessons here. So when I want to start a lesson, for example, I have my Nearpod demonstration, which I'll show you guys in a second. When we go here, we have a couple of different things we can do. This first one, live participation plus Zoom, is actually new. It wasn't there when I started creating the presentation. And then as the next day it was there. So it's brand new. So I don't know too much about that one quite yet, but it sounds exciting, not gonna lie to you. What I've used before is live participation. And with live participation, just as you would with any other sorts of Kahoots or Gimkits, I can give them the code when they go to join.nearpod.com. I can give them the link. If I have Google Classroom, I can throw it in there. I can email it to them, all sorts of different things from that end. And that's if I want to do it on a synchronous line. If I want to do it on, let's say I want to assign them this, let's say I'm not in school or they're at home and I want them working on this, I can assign it as student paced. And they just tell me, oh, it has a collaborate board, right? I can continue. And then I get this sort of code for the students. And what I would do is I would give them the link or embed it or add it to Google Classroom if I use Google Classroom. I can also require student responses and prevent them from skipping. So it's really cool from that end. On the teacher side as well, in terms of okay, they did all this work, where does it go? I have what they call theirs reports, which sounds super fancy to me. So I have a report here. And right now it's going to be kind of empty because there hasn't been too much here. So in this Nearpod demonstration, for example, I have a bunch of different kinds of questions. And so what I'll do is each time I click on it, I get summaries of different things. So when I go to my quiz, for example, I can see the questions and I can see what students answered. When I go to open-ended questions, this is where if you do a speaking recording or a writing recording, I can then click on each student's individual audio or read each individual student's writing. It attaches their name right to it for you. Draw it, I can see what each student drew. I can see how they did on the matching activities. I can see their responses on the collaborating board. I can see their fill in the blanks, and I can see how they're doing with an interactive video as well. So, and I can go up here as well. And if I don't want to do it on the website, I can download. I can download either from the student view or session view, and I tend to do session view as a PDF. And I have that information, I have that file, and then I can go through and kind of analyze that way. So it looks very intimidating from an outsider's point of view, very, very honestly with you. But as you start to kind of mess around with the features a little bit, it's really cool. They also have some things over here for teachers. So we have our Nearpod library. So there are some very, very generous human beings out there who like to post their lessons on here. So for world language teachers, we would press other, even though there is usually an option for world language. So we should push them on that. They're usually pretty good about responding. But I could type in different lessons, or if I just want to see how people set them up, or I just want to see what they look like, that's also an option. A lot of schools, one of the cool features here, a lot of schools will allow over here a Nearpod school library. So let's say you're working with a department and we're all at the point where we don't want to keep reinventing the wheel. So let's say that I create a Nearpod activity that I want to do with my Spanish 2 students, and I want all the teachers on the Spanish 2 team to be able to access that. I can just add it to what would normally be here, or I can just add it to the regular library that way. Before I keep going, do we have any questions? I see a question about importing Google Slides. Yes, I believe you can do, and you can also start with a Google slide. You can also go right from your Google slide and you can start just creating your Nearpod that way. I like to start here for some reason. That's just my preference, but you can do it either way. In terms of money as well, this is free. This starts out free. There is a pro edition, but for most, I would say all the features that we really need are free for teachers. Lisa. Oh, back on mute.
There you go. Yeah, hit it twice. So the interactive video, is that the Flipgrid, or is that a separate interactive video within Nearpod? Because Flipgrid goes out to Flipgrid, right?
Yep, that's more like Edpuzzle.
Oh, that's more like Edpuzzle. I've never used that before.
Well, you are
new. I mean, no, Edpuzzle, yes, but the interactive video part, I've never, because I used Nearpod at the beginning of the year. I stopped using it, but now you're making me want to use it again. Seriously.
I'm very convincing that way.
Yeah, but I have never used the interactive video part.
So let's try it out, actually. So here's my thought, right? I feel like it's one of those things where okay, this is what it looks like from the teacher end, but how often do we actually get to experience this from a student end? So here's what I was thinking. If you wouldn't mind indulging us, I'm going to go from teacher end. I'm going to live participation and start a new section. And what I would love is if all of you could join me. I'm going to copy my link here and copy that. And if you go to the chat, you have a link to the Nearpod. You also have, if you're interested in just doing it a different way, you can go to join.nearpod.com and you have a code here that you'll enter as well. I'll give people a minute to log on. I would love some audience participation and just love for you to see what it looks like on a student side with some just basic features of Nearpod. Give people a second to log on. I say I got 8 people left. Fantastic.
Oh,
all right, so I'm going to ask you to kind of toggle back and forth if you don't mind. So if you toggle, you can see my screen and then you have your own screen, correct? So on my screen, you're going to see what it looks like on the teacher side as I'm going through a presentation. On your screens, you're going to see what the students will see. So when I do this with my students, I'm not sharing my screen. I can actually see their faces, which makes it feel so much better because I feel like sometimes sharing screens during a Zoom meeting gets a little old, right? So for what I'm seeing is I can click down here and I can see who my people who have signed up for. I can see that I have my 9 people here. And I make sure that I have everybody on this slide that says, welcome to my Nearpod presentation. So I'm going to go on to the next activity. As the teacher, I press this button here. On your screens, you're going to start to see a video. And I'm going to choose to do teacher play. So here's what I'm going to do. This is, oops, here we go. This is just a very, we're going to do 5 seconds of this video. This is what we were talking about, Lisa. So I'm going to play a video for you, and the video is going to pause and ask you a question. If you could please be so kind as to respond to the question.
Introducing Nearpod. With Nearpod, you can make every lesson interactive.
Alrighty, so on your computer, you should now have the options of make every lesson boring or make every lesson interactive. I was going for simple questions today. All right, once you answer, take a look at what I'm seeing on my screen as the teacher. So on my screen, I get this nice little graph here that I can use, and I can see responses that way. I can go in, I can find at the end, I'll be able to see like individual student responses. I also have this that I can press for you as well to share the responses and look at what you have on your screens now. Now you have that sort of data too, which is really cool. So I'm going to keep going on to our next one, okay? So I'm just going to show you the different features. So this is the interactive video feature. The next thing you're going to get is, this is an open-ended question. So the question is, tell me about a time you used technology in your classroom. I bet this question would have been really different if I asked you last year. I have write or speak your answer. If you want to try the speaking, go for it. If you want to try the writing, go for it as well. And when you're done, take a look at my screen.
I used technology earlier today when we were doing a comparison, and I used Nearpod to do it. You didn't answer the question. Submit anyway. Oh, well. I have to speak my answer, and it's not letting me speak it. Where is it? Oh, there it is. I used Nearpod earlier today with my 5th period Spanish class. You didn't answer the question. Okay, so what is this happening? Submit anyway. Oh, no, I guess I didn't do it. Edit answer.
All right, so take a look at my screen now. So I can see students that wrote their answers in. I also have some audio, which is fantastic. Some people trying out the audio feature in there. So I can, again, share answers with students, with the whole class. Now you can see Maureen's answer. I could share. I personally wouldn't share the audios out because I know sometimes people get a little self-conscious about those sorts of things, but I can also like show them from my end if I want to hide student names or things like that. So I see how much participation. So this would be the writing, the open-ended questions, open-ended writing or open-ended speaking questions. Let's try the next one. Here's some matching for you. Match these terms to their pictures or definitions. Go ahead and do the matching on your screen and then take a look at what it looks like on my end. Some of you are like, yes, geography, and the others are like, oh no, not geography. Right, so then you see on my screen, I see the bolded people's names here are the ones that have completed. I can see how many matches they were able to complete or where they're still working at, how many attempts it took them, how many tries it took them to do that. Right? So on the student, I love to do this with vocabulary. Vocabulary has kind of become like my thing apart from grammar. Like I love to teach about grammar. And now I'm like working on how to really meaningfully do vocabulary. And this is just a really nice activity. I do it a lot with pictures, or I'll do definitions like Spanish word to Spanish definition or Spanish word to examples. Like those are different types of features that I like to do with that. So that's with matching. Really, really simple to create. You just choose your two terms and decide if you can do pictures or you can do words like you saw there. Here's a quiz for you. Where do I teach? Random question for him. Don't worry if you don't know. Give you about another second to respond if you haven't yet. Alrighty, and let me share out the responses. So on my end, I can see how the different students responded, and now on your end, I just shared the answer. You get a little graph to see like how people have been answering, and you get to see the correct answer at the bottom. I do teach at Wellesley High School. So those are the quizzes. I like to do those in a couple of different ways. I'll do those like, for example, I can do them as survey questions for students where I kind of get like a sense of like, which ones do you like, which ones do you dislike, or I'll do this with an activity called structured input, where people are choosing the correct things where I'll say like, okay, read each one of these statements and determine if they're talking about somebody like what they did yesterday or what they're going to do tomorrow. And I might give some context there. So this is the quizzes feature. So from the student end and the teacher end. Let's see, we got a couple more things for you. So now you get to try some drawing. This one should be entertaining. So draw what you hear me describe. All right, so I'm going to describe what I have in front of me. In front of me right now, I have a brick fireplace. It has lots of bricks, a lot of red and white bricks. There's no fire in the fireplace. It's pretty wide. It's not very tall. And there's a white wall right above it with some pictures on it. I'll say that one more time. So I got a chimney in front of me, or not chimney, we call it you call it a chimney. Or a fireplace, I should say, is probably the right word. I have a fireplace, is like red bricks. There's some white bricks in there. There's no fire in the fireplace. There's, let's see what else to describe. It's very wide. It's not very tall. Let's see, there's a white wall above it, and there's kind of like a mantle with some pictures on it. So when you're done, you can press submit, or if you just feel like you've done as much as you can, take a look at on my computer. On my end, it's really entertaining to see all of the different drawings, and actually very impressive with how well some people can draw fireplaces. It's very, very impressive. So this is an awesome activity. I like to do this, like I said, in two different ways. I could describe a scene for students to draw on their individual computers, and they can draw it that way, describe vocabulary words for them to draw, things like that. Another way I could do is I could set what you're drawing on. I could set a background picture. So for example, let's say I have an infographic and I want students to circle things on the infographic. Or let's say I do an article and I want them to see different things on it. I want them to annotate. I want them to show me your favorite part. Find me a part that you didn't understand. What part was most interesting to you? I want you to use different symbols, and I can have students annotate it right away on the Nearpod itself. It's really, really cool for that. I really like that. All right, a couple more. So this is the collaborating board. This is kind of like a Padlet. To approve comments, so I'm going to say no. So how do you see yourself using Nearpod in the future? So if you go down at the bottom where it says share thoughts or images here, you can write up to 250 words. You can also put pictures on there if you want to have students do pictures. But just in a short little response, tell me, how do you see yourself using Nearpod in the future? And it's okay if you don't. That's completely fine. I don't work for them. So I see mine, and I think on people's, I see great to work with vocabulary, much more use in the future. People have enjoyed it with my 7th and 8th graders. Oh, perfect. Look at that, a little word cloud, engaging student learn. Perfect. So you have these little features as well where you can go through and you can give hearts to things. Great to combine a lot of things in one place. I think vocabulary is the biggest thing. That was my biggest takeaway, was like, just what are some vocabulary things we can do with this? Like I said, synchronous and asynchronous for that. All right, so we have our collaboration board here as well. Perfect. One more feature for you to see. I just want you to see what the fill in the blanks look like. So go ahead and fill in the blanks of that story. So you're going to drag and drop the different words to fill in the blanks of that little pretend story. Okay. Starting to see some people complete. Sounds good. Good.
Mike, can you, so I answered mine really silly. But it shows that I got 0 out of 7. This is Elisa, by the way. So if you click on mine, can you then see what my answers were? You're welcome to use me as an example. Oh, I see. You have view answers up in the top. Okay, so if you need to look at any of them further, like mine clearly would stick out. You go, oh boy, what was that kid doing? You click view answers and okay. Awesome.
Yeah, and let's take a look at that when we look at the report, because now that we have all these answers, I'm gonna get a report. So we'll take a look at what it looks like on my end for me to be able to say, all right, Lisa, I think let's have a little chat.
Okay, great.
Awesome. All right. So one other thing that I just want to point out here too is you can always add an activity, because I think this has happened to me before where I'm like, ooh, this would be a really great check for understanding. Let me add a quick activity here. And I can add like a draw, I can add a slider, I can add a true or false or an open-ended question if I notice the kids maybe need a step in between. Okay. So I'm done with, we're all done with our class. Everything's great. We've been on Zoom for all this time. You're all just like super, super duper smart. Teacher, and I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna make sure I end the session. Okay, so now the Nearpod is closed. So now I wanna take a look at how everybody did. So I'm gonna go to my reports like I showed you earlier. And here I'm going to go to today's date, which today would be the 4th. So I have my summary. I see some people skipped, nay. I'm just kidding. So we have some correct answers, right? So let's go to our quiz. Let's see how people responded. I can see people's answers here. Open-ended things. Tell me about a time you use technology. This is where I now have all of these audio recordings here. So I can just click play on somebody's, and I can go through question by question, person by person, and I can go through and listen to them. In terms of the drawings, now I can see all of your drawings here. The matching pairs, like we saw before, we can see how people were responding, whether they completed. We have the collaborate board where we can see the board itself where your names show up. We have the fill in the blanks activity. We can see how many people were getting right and how many people were getting wrong. Interactive video, seeing how people responded as well. And again, I can go up here to download. So let's download this as a PDF. We'll do it, let's do it on my local drive. And so now here's the PDF of what I actually was just looking at. So I can see people's responses on each one of these. I can see people's answers here, see the answers here as well. I can just keep going down like that. So I have all of this awesome data on how things went in my class. So I see a couple things in the chat. Totally agree, Professor. I totally agree. It was very intimidating there as well. How do you get to the word bank? How do you get the word bank at the bottom? Oh, how do you create the word bank? Is that your question, Leslie?
Yes, like how were you able to put the word bank in the slide?
Absolutely. Let's take a look. So I'm going to go to, I'm just going to make a new one right here for us. So when I create the activity, right, so I'm going to go here, I'm going to click on activities, and I'm going to make it fill in the blanks activity. I'm going to choose my sort of font over here, and I'm going to say, okay, this is it. So the first thing they're going to ask you to do is write out your whole text, right? So that's where you're going to say, I was walking down the street when it started to rain. Right, so I'm going to write out my whole text ahead of time, so I could just copy it from somewhere if I have song lyrics or whatever, press next. Now it says click on the words on the right that you want to add to your word bank. So I was walking on the street and it started to rain, and it creates them that way for me. And then I press done, and the word bank is already made for me.
Okay.
If you had an activity in Nearpod, but you created it in slides. So Lisa, to be quite honest, I'm not the slides. I don't start in slides for some reason with this, so I don't know the answer to that, but I can look for you if you're interested. You can take a look at the end once we finish, we'll see what it looks like.
I started in slides because when I first started this, I only had the free version, and it used up, because I'm very graphic oriented, I use lots and lots of graphics. I used up all my memory in the Nearpod, so I had to find another way. And so slides allows you to hold it into slides, and then you just convert it again to Nearpod. But I'm wondering, because I've always wanted to be able to add in the middle, like you say, you know, it really makes a difference. Like, let me just put up something here for us to work on real quick. I don't know what happens when you go back to slides, because it can screw up the slides one that you did. I don't know. I'd be curious. I'd have to try it.
Yeah, we can play around with it at the end. Let's try it. All right, so I just want to show you.
I wonder, Lisa, if you just create a copy of your original, just to be safe, create a copy of your original Google Slides and then just name it, you know, Google Slides for Nearpod, or just put, well, whatever the assignment's called, and then Nearpod after it, so you know which one you messed around with in Nearpod, and then see what it does to it without ruining your original one. Maybe would be a good way to start. That's a great question, though.
Yeah, I think it would be almost the opposite that would ruin it, because it doesn't ruin it in slides, because you create it with the Nearpod in the slides. So that it's if you add it in slides, I don't know how that would work. It's worth trying just to see, because the memory, there's not a whole lot of memory when you have the free version, and I'm always so darn graphic oriented. So
yeah, we'll try around with it. We'll see what it looks like. Yeah. All right, so I want to finish up before we start kind of making some of our own. I want you to see just some ideas of what this might look like for your classroom. And the way I like to think of it is like I like to go through the modes and go through different activities this way. So what sorts of interpretive activities can I do? I can ask some pre-reading or pre-listening questions before I ever starting the video or starting the reading. I can use the quiz feature for that. I can do open-ended questions for that. I can pre-teach vocabulary with the fill in the blanks. I can match the vocabulary that way. Inserting those videos with the questions, that was that first thing you did where you watched part of that Nearpod video and I inserted a question. You can have those videos right there. You can insert readings and ask kids, like I said, to mark up the text with the drawing feature. You just set it as a background and have them draw that way. You could also just do your reading with questions, right? You give them a reading and you give them the different quiz questions that you could have them answering. And then again, the drawing what you hear, drawing what you read, give me a visual representation of what you just understood. So for example, here's one where I could say, circle all the fruits and vegetables on this graphic. So I set this graphic as a background, and then students would go down here. And if they were to circle all fruits and vegetables, they have access to then doing all sorts of circling, all sorts of drawings on this, just to kind of, just a different way. Instead of saying, read this, now I'm saying, okay, why don't you do something with what you just read there? And then we saw earlier, this was what I was talking about, where I inserted the video and I have the questions along the way for me to ask them. And this would be in live participation or student-paced mode. Interpersonal is a little bit more limited, not gonna lie to you, but there's a couple of things just to kind of think about. The Collaborate board could work for a slight interpersonal writing, almost like a very delayed interpersonal writing. I think they would consider it to be snail mail at that point. There is the Flipgrid integration if you want to do, again, a little bit delayed speaking that way. The one I like the most is that simulated, I call it AP style because it's those AP simulated conversations. But again, don't limit yourself to just thinking AP. It's definitely for all different kinds of levels where you can ask the question in audio, have them respond in audio. So that would look like this. So on the student, and you saw here, you had the option. I would probably tell students, you need to speak your answer and you need to press the record audio button and they could respond to a question that way. Presentational mode, open-ended questions for writing or speaking, where I just give them a prompt and they write about it in the open-ended response. And same with the speaking if I want them to just kind of talk for a little bit. Vocabulary building activities. I want to give you, this is one that I did with my Spanish 2 students. This is when I was first working with Nearpod. And yes, videos from YouTube. I see that question in the chat. That's where I got my video, was from YouTube. I was able to do that. If you click on the tiny URL I just threw in the chat for you, it's a Nearpod activity that I did with my Spanish 2 students before we started, before we were about to do some listening and some reading to us, some authentic resources. So we did a lot of pre-teaching with some of the key vocabulary I wanted them to understand, but also be able to use in the future. Just to kind of see, that was an asynchronous lesson. So they were working at their own pace that way. Vocabulary has the biggest potential for this. So that's where you can do your matching of pictures, matching of definitions, so those words, drawing the different pictures to represent the words, filling in the blank activities, right? Writing with the vocabulary words in the open-ended response questions. And then grammar, because I can't not talk about grammar because, you know, I've become the grammar guy and all of these sorts of things. If you're structured input using those quiz features where you give them some sort of targeted grammar you're trying to get them to notice in that situation, you give them a scenario and you give them some sort of distinction of what they're looking for. If you're interested in learning more about structured input, little advertisement, that is one of the parts of the course we learn about structured input in the French course that's starting on Monday, or in the Spanish course that we're offering in the future as well. And explaining grammar feature, I mean, if you want to go, will also admit there are certain things that I'm just like, this is just how it works. Sometimes you just need a quick little pop-up grammar, quick little, let me explain this, and you can record a video in Nearpod or insert a video from that you've created, or insert a video from Nearpod, from YouTube as well. So this would be an example of, well, like I said, a structured input activity. This was the beginning part where there's no right or wrong answers, but they're just processing the meaning of those verbs, processing the meaning of those sentences, and making meaning of the new grammar they were working with. With live classes, it's really great because everyone kind of logs on and follows along as a class, and you as the teacher move the slides along. So you move them along, you can ask them questions, you can push out information, you can push out the correct responses to students, you can get student answers. I like it a lot for that. I find it a little bit more interactive than some of the options I've used. And asynchronous classes, that's when you can give students the link. They work independently. I just say, here is the link. I want you to log on and start working on this. They move the slides along. They answer their own questions. Quite honestly, in a world where COVID is finally over and I'm no longer teaching on Zoom, I actually plan, this is one of those technologies, I really, when I choose technology, I like to invest in ones that I can see myself using in the future. And this is one that I think would be great for homework assignments or substitute assignments. Really, I think it's going to have a real impact. So without any further ado, I would love for you guys to, if you're interested, stop sharing so I can see everyone. I would love to, if you would like to start kind of trying some things out, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them that way.